Hello and welcome to the Relax, It's Just Business podcast, the bi-monthly show where we discuss everything business, like the news, reviews, and tips that you can use. We are your hosts. My name is Louie Z, and I am graciously accompanied by my good friend, Mike T. So without further ado, relax, sit back, and let's talk business. So Mike, first podcast, man.
Yeah, it's exciting times here for me and you, so I'm excited to get started.
This is something that we have talked about and kind of dabbled back and forth with on Facebook for quite a long time, and I know that you've been involved in a fairly successful podcast yourself, so I'm excited to be with a seasoned podcaster where I haven't really done anything like this outside of like small organizational things.
Yeah, we'll kind of get to that and explore what we're all about. But I think first we should let the listeners know what the heck is this? What are we doing right now?
Yeah, so the first podcast here, we're almost dubbing it. We're calling it podcast number 1, but it's pretty much our pilot kind of test episode. In this episode, we're going to go over, exactly what this podcast is, and then kind of talk about what you can expect on this bi-monthly basis and kind of go through the whole layout of everything. So essentially, we just want to make this to be something where, business normally is just really fast-paced, just tension and kind of like a little bit too, not stuck up, but just too serious. And both of our personalities are fairly relaxed, laid back, but we're still business-minded people. And so we want to be able to bring more of a studious approach to it, as well as a young professional approach to it, and kind of make something more relatable to more people. I mean, that's kind of what you're feeling this to be as well, right?
Absolutely. I think everything's kind of going lightning speed, and we just want to make sure everybody kind of relaxes and takes a step back and kind of see this from the 30,000-foot view. We're going to kind of point out some tips and tricks and things that could help not just, me, you, and the young adult, but anybody who's interested in business or might be entering or already in the corporate world. So I think this gives us a good opportunity to share our experiences and do some research for people who might not have the time and provide it for them in a nice little podcast here. So,
yeah, I think that's really well said. And I think we're just going to kind of make this, a professional yet prepared, but kind of a non-edited format to where we're just going to, whatever we say throughout the podcast, whatever thoughts and feelings we're going to have, just kind of an unedited, open, raw version of kind of what we're feeling. So,
yeah. And this is going to be rated explicit. So all you small children out there, make sure you go get an adult to listen with you. So,
we're not necessarily going to be too PC at all times, just because we're just going to be real with you.
Yeah, this is us. This is what you get. You're getting us.
All right, so what you can expect to see. So on a bi-monthly basis, so we shoot on Tuesdays, we piece the podcast together on Wednesday, and then we're going to put it out on Thursday for everyone to see. So it's every other Thursday. So this upcoming Thursday is February 1st, which is perfect because then we could just go 2 weeks from there. And continue doing that. As well as the breakdown. Mike, you want to go over the breakdown of what the podcast is going to be and kind of give people an idea?
Yeah, so I think like I said, we've kind of want to keep it lighthearted, but kind of still make sure that we're giving some tips and tricks. And hopefully you guys can get to know us better along the way. The first thing that we're always going to try to start with is a current event, something that's going on, maybe something that doesn't have to be 100% urgency, but, can allow us to still talk about it and something that maybe just happened in the last week or so. Now we know this is going to be published a couple days later. So, anything that happens in between isn't going to be held to us, but we'll find some sort of topic, anything from cryptocurrency, which has been going crazy, or, you got things like state of the dress going on, or just general current event topics that are happening. And that's going to be kind of the first step that we do. And then you're going to see us also try to make sure that every single show we have some sort of better yourself in business. And that's kind of the segment we're going to talk about and keep it there. We're going to tell you, here's a tip or here's a trick that maybe you know, maybe you don't, but it's going to be something that we can help everybody, help a young professional, help someone who's already in the business, help someone that's been around for 30 years. And just little tips and tricks that you can use to help make yourself more successful. And then last, what we're going to do, starting off, we're going to kind of talk about personal interests. I think as the show develops, we'd really like to get guests in here. Maybe we'll reach out to Elon Musk or, maybe Steve Jobs from the dead or something. And that really get
the dream. Yeah.
Get some surprises in there. But I think what we just want to do is kind of share some of our personal interests and, just kind of keep that section fun and kind of throw a wrench in there every so often, but nothing too rigid and nothing too crazy, and then kind of leave you guys with something fun like that. So I think that hits all the bases, right, Louie?
Yeah, so that's technically the rough layout that you and I had planned. And that can fluctuate depending on what kind of show we're going to have that one week if we want to change it up just a little bit. But this is something that we can be really firm about, that every Thursday you're going to get these 3 basic topics. And we're going to take some breaks in between section 1 and 2 and in between section 2 and 3. And that is just built in for potential sponsors down the road. But right now we're going to use it for, different product reviews that we use in business. We like to do different whiskey and cigar reviews, just various things that are quintessential to the business person. But we're going to try to change it up, just in case you're not a smoker or not a cigar smoker or a whiskey or scotch or alcohol cocktail drinker, that you can still enjoy that. But for example, so a good topic that we, could potentially cover down the road would be, for example, today, Amazon, their new healthcare business, where they're getting involved with JP Morgan Chase and Berkshire Hathaway to form this really ambitious healthcare company that's still kind of up in the air and kind of vague. But you got these big 3 corporate giants partnering together.
Right.
And so, that could be something that we could dive deep into. That's a topic that, while it will change down the road, it's likely that when it broke today, that news is going to stay relevant on Thursday. So like you said, the State of the Union address is probably something that we won't be able to cover live, during the podcast, because we record and do things like that. So
yeah, I think it's it's good. I think this is going to give us an opportunity to kind of, like you said, learn how podcasts run, and our biggest thing is going to be feedback from listeners. So if you guys have anything, reach out to us on. We're going to have a Twitter page. We're going to have a Facebook. We're going to have all these forms of social media that we highly encourage you guys to reach out to us, because this is for you. We're gonna write this, and we're gonna list some fun topics and try to get as much input from you guys as we can. So we'll keep it a revolving door. And heck, if we're gonna change this thing over to a Mike and Louie punch each other podcast, then let's do that. So we're going to keep it along those general guidelines that we laid out, but who knows where this is going to head. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I know that at first, it might seem a little choppy and not as fluid, but we're going to get better as we go on. We're both learning. I know that you've had some more of that experience before, but I haven't, so it's just going to be a really cool learning experience, and we're going to be able to kind of grow together as well as individual podcasters. So I think if you don't have anything else to add for this first section, I think we'll go ahead and take a break and then come back and talk about bettering yourself in business.
You know what I like to do when I got some free time and I can relax? I like to sit down to a nice glass of whiskey and pull out a great big stogie.
Oh man, it is the best. I'll tell you.
I know me and Louie have bonded over cigars. Our first meeting was actually at a cigar bar. We were able to hammer out some of the details. So I think one of the big things that we want to talk about, and something you'll hear quite frequently, is Mike and Louie's cigar suggestions, and maybe a little bit of whiskey pairing, if we can.
Yeah, I don't know if my palate is quite as refined yet to be a sommelier of, of the cigar and whiskey pairing, but you know what? We're going to give it our best try.
Yeah, and trust me, I've tried a good amount of whiskeys, but if you stuck them in front of me, a blind taste test, I don't think I could tell you all the good ones. Obviously, I know the difference between something like a Jack Daniel's and a finer glass of scotch, but I think it's just going to be a good start for us. It's also going to give us the opportunity to sample some whiskeys, sample some cigars. But I think first, what we should do is, what's your favorite type of whiskey, Louie?
I really like Scotch. I don't know if it's a Kingsman thing that really got me into it, or what, but I really do like Scotch a lot. It all kind of happened at the same time, where I was watching the Kingsman movies, and I'm already really into dressing up in suits and fashion and things like that. And then that paired to where they were drinking Scotch, and then right after that I'd been gifted a bottle, and it's just so great. So that is my preferred. But what about you?
Yeah, so most people who know me already know that my roommates are really, really into whiskeys and scotches and bourbons, and we've created quite the nice collection at our place. So we're pretty excited about that, and since doing that, we get to try a lot. And so the best thing is I've gotten to pick a favorite, and right now, if I had to go upstairs and grab a glass, my kind of everyday whiskey, if you will, is Woodford Reserve. I know they're out in Kentucky. It's a really nice distillery, and just been fortunate enough to try it out, go to the distillery, learn a little bit more about it. But it seems to be a really smooth, really simple whiskey for people that want something like that. So I know, that's my brand right now, but who knows? In 6 months, it could change.
Right. That's great. Yeah, I often will gift that bottle to, professors that I'm working with, or, I shouldn't say often. I have gifted that bottle in the past, and just because it is a very good whiskey to go to, and it doesn't hurt your pocket either, which is nice.
Right. I think that's my sweet spot, is trying to find something that's in that $30 to $40 range. Still going to be a good drink for you, but and the number one time I drink whiskey is when you pair it with a cigar. I think it really opens up different flavors and allows for some nice pairings. So that one has found and been a really good option when I'm trying a different cigar or trying something new. It just seems to not hinder the taste or anything like that.
Yeah, perfect. For me, I just put this on my radar on New Year's. New Year's Eve this year, a buddy of mine, real good friend, he he didn't win. He didn't win, but he came in second in our fantasy football league.
There you go.
And so he used the money that he got to buy this bottle of Ardbeg, and I don't know if I'm saying that right, but Ardbeg 10 years old. And it is the most interesting bottle of scotch I've ever had. And now, granted, I'm only 23, so I don't have as many years on me. Some people might scoff at that or whatever, but it's won a lot of awards, and it was so different. It was so smoky, so complex. It didn't have like too much of that peat taste, but it just had like a natural sweetness to it. But the smokiness just blew me away, and that just pairs so well with any kind of smoking that you're going to be doing, and in terms of cigars, it just pairs so well. And their website's pretty cool because it lays out all the different flavors that you're going to be getting with it. But and I can honestly like pick these out where it's got just like a small like citrusy taste. They say it's lemon and lime. I don't know. It's just like a more citrusy taste. Black pepper, definitely. That cinnamon toffee, but then that smoke really comes through on the taste and especially on your nose. And so it's just such a great glass to sip, and it's definitely going to be on my list to be put into my cabinet as soon as possible. And it's just about right around the $50 mark. So a little bit higher of a bottle, but that's definitely something that you want to break out with friends or just on your own when you're sit back and just enjoying listening to this podcast, for example. But I was just so blown away. And hopefully you can tell by how enthused I'm getting about this, but I was just so blown away by it that I have to mention that on podcast number 1.
I think that's good for us. I think we are going to have some good pairings. We'll get some expensive bottles. We'll get some cheap bottles. We'll kind of go all over the place, but it's going to give us a good yin and yang because I'm not a huge smoky whiskey kind of guy. So we'll do some pair tastings and go from there. But I think from now, listeners, if you have any suggestions or you want us to sample some bottles or give it a try or anything like that, just let us know. But I think what we're going to do now is get back into the podcast and give you guys some good tips and kind of discuss who we are. Welcome back to the RIJB podcast. Again, this is Mike and Louie, and we're going to be talking about, kind of who we are and what we bring to the table. Now, Louie, I know, like myself, you're an NIU grad, but can you give us a little bit of background, kind of what you do and where you want to go and more interesting facts about yourself like that?
Yeah, so I feel like I have a fairly interesting, studious background. So I am a graduate from Northern Illinois University. I did get my marketing undergrad. I also got a social entrepreneurship minor. And for those who don't know what social entrepreneurship is, it's essentially tackling social business crisis around the world, crises. So like poverty, hunger, inequality, different like racial inequality as well as gender inequality around the world, and then you tackle those problems with a business mindset. So that was my minor, and then I also received my sales certificate, and I'm now pursuing my master's in information systems, so my MIS degree from Northern as well. And I just finished applying to Ph.D. school, so I want to teach in the marketing field, and I want to better the world by inspiring young minds through education is kind of what I hold myself to. But the reason I say that my background is fairly interesting is because I changed my major a ton of times. I went to college with the ambitions to play golf professionally. And so I started off by playing golf at like a local private college, and then I was doing psychology and philosophy, ended up changing my mind, going to a community college and doing graphic design for a year. Then I changed my mind again, and I was doing business administration for a semester. And then I changed to marketing, went into sales, had a sales internship, was fairly successful with that, and then decided that I wanted to be an instructor or a professor and teach as well and do research instead, I should say. And so I feel like what I offered to this podcast is offering a student's perspective on business, what people should look for, how to dress on a budget, how to nail that job interview at a job fair when there's 300 other applicants and students walking around, how to stand out from a crowd, business cards, resume building, as well as just what to do and make yourself stand out amongst such a saturated field, and regardless of what major. And then some of the positions that I've held within academia has been, I have been a marketing and social media intern for our College of Business for multiple years. I'm now a graduate research assistant and have had 2 papers now be accepted into conferences. And so I will be traveling to New Orleans hopefully this May to go ahead and present that with the other co-authors that I'm working with in the department. So I feel like I have my roots pretty deeply woven within the academic field, and hopefully I can provide that student perspective for all the younger listeners that we hopefully receive on the podcast.
Yeah, I think that's going to give us a real opportunity, and I think what that also does is kind of open up a little door for me to kick down. I took kind of a real traditional approach to school. I knew I wanted to do business. I went in with hopes of being in accounting. Took a couple years of the undergrad, getting ready for accounting, and then realized that it was not fun. It was a lot of numbers, a lot of looking at spreadsheets, things that I just didn't enjoy. And I actually went to all of the deans and all of the different career centers for each subject, and I flipped through all the catalogs and the textbooks. And the marketing one looked like a lot of fun. I liked all the subject matter. I like everything about it. So I ended up going into sales. I got marketing and sales. So I got the sales certificate. I did entrepreneurship minor. And when I got out of college, I did none of that. I ended up getting a internship doing purchasing as a buyer for True Value, and I worked there for a year and a half, and then I had an opportunity to run their corporate store. So I was essentially the manager and owner of the store. I had to do everything from working the front counter to inventory, just putting away shelves, to preparing tax documentation, things like that. And then after that, I was fortunate enough to land a position at Lawson Products as a product manager. And so now I'm in charge of a product category, and I choose the products that our company sells. So pretty excited. I really enjoy the work. I like the company, and it's also been a good spot and allowed me to branch off just a little bit and start my own business, which is that entrepreneurship minor is coming into play a little bit. So I've been able to work with my 2 roommates, Kevin and Tom, and we now own a building, and we're renting it under a business. So, I'm going to try to give some tips and tricks and maybe a little bit of information on how we started our business along the way. So it's been a really fun process. It's still really new, just about since June. So you're going to kind of get to see the business grow with me. And like I said, tips and tricks along the way. So I think we'll get a really good balance, a really good wide range of what we can hit here. And like I said, the listeners got some fun stuff to listen to and some interesting topics that we're going to be able to hit.
Yeah, I think that's why you and I are going to work so well together. And when we start talking about like why our podcast, there are plenty of business podcasts out there, and just like all of us out there, we listen to a bunch of different podcasts, so we're just looking to be another one in your routine. But I feel like what you're going to find is having that young student perspective, whether you're a seasoned professional or someone just getting into the business world, knowing what younger minds are thinking is always going to be beneficial for you to either run your business or to grow your own business, and just to grow yourself. But then also having that young professional approach like Mike can offer is just really, really interesting, because most people don't come out of college and then immediately start their own real estate company and then try to build that from the ground up, as well as working in a big corporate environment as well. So I think we're going to provide a more relaxed, real perspective, and not something that's going to be superficial down your throat, just something that's going to be you're going to be able to connect with, as well as learn and grow from.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think what we should something I want to know, Louie, from you is why do you even want to do a podcast? What's driving you to really, really want to do this?
So, I've wanted to do it for a while, and I know that doesn't answer your question, but it's just something that I've really just had the hopes and desires to make something that people will enjoy, people will learn from, and try to be an influencer in whatever I do. And I think that's why it feeds so well into what I want to make my professional career, which is being a professor. So my hope is to utilize my blog at louiszmich.com, LOUISZMICH.com, which these podcasts are going to be uploaded to then put them on iTunes. So shameless plug, but necessary plug. And I want to use my blog as well as these podcasts to then intertwine them within my lessons that I will potentially be teaching as a professor, 4 years down the road. So what would be really cool is if we continue doing this, it picks up a lot of steam. We're getting really cool guests on here, and then I can make those connections, utilize those interviews and things like that to then work them into the classroom. Because by then, we could potentially have hundreds of episodes, and I can then point back to a specific podcast we did and have students listen to them in order to gain more real insider business knowledge while I'm teaching in the classroom. So I'm really hoping to merge all those together, from my work experience to my blog experience to the podcast environment, and kind of make that a trio to educate people off of.
No, I think that's good. I know personally I listen to a ton of podcasts, and it's something I've always wanted to do. I think it gives me a really good outlet, a really good opportunity to kind of share some stuff and just kind of talk out what's going on. I know before this, you kind of mentioned this too, that I did do a podcast before. I was part of a sports podcast, just as kind of, it was led by somebody else, and I was kind of on a board, and we went around and discussed different sports topics. So you'll see a lot of topics come up when it comes to like our personal interest segments. I know I'm going to talk about sports a lot. And even better yet, if I can do the business of sports, I think that's really entertaining to me. Trade deadlines and free agencies, and how people can acquire the correct players, and what you can do to stay under caps, things like that. I think it's ingenious, and it's fun to watch for me. So I want to continue the podcast. The other one kind of broke up because our host moved on to some bigger and better things, and he ended up getting a job for ESPN. So he's doing some fun work right now, and the podcast kind of took a back seat, and I don't blame him. So right. That's why I'm here, and that's why I want to do a podcast again. I'm really excited about it.
I love it. Hey, so I know that kind of talks and touches on why us, why the pod. Why don't you say what don't you say that we take a break and then come back with our tip of the week?
That sounds good. Let's see what we got in our tip bag for him. Hey guys, we wanted to kind of share with you a tip of the week. And this is going to be our segment, Young Business Mind Tip of the Week. And this is just going to give you a little something, maybe one little nugget to take away that will be useful in the day-to-day life of a young professional. The tip that I'm going to have for you, and the tip that Louie is going to share, is starting the day off right. It's going to all center around, it doesn't matter what else is going on. It doesn't matter, what work you're doing or what you got ahead of you. What's something you can do to make sure you start the day off right? And the big tip that I have is making your bed. It seems really small, and personally, I know my room's really cluttered, but one of the things I really try to stick to is making my bed. I think it gives you a small sense of accomplishment. It gives you, kind of a clean look. And it kind of lets you know that, okay, we started off doing something constructive, doing something good, setting ourselves as a nice base. And even better when you're ready to go to sleep at night, if it's a long, hard day or you're stressed out, all you have to do is peel back a couple covers and hop into bed. So for me, that's the tip of the week. I think that's my tip of the week, and I know Louie's got something else that's going to help you guys out as well.
Yeah, I mean, just going off of your point there, I use Wunderlist, and it's really great because it can be used on a browser, on a tablet, on your phone. And what I do at the beginning of every semester is I put in every single due date that I'll possibly have throughout the whole semester. I put it in there, and then when you click on like the week, it'll tell you, what you have coming up. But then there's also a to-do list, and so I have all these things on the to-do list. And so right when you wake up in the morning, if you could check off made my bed, that's already one item off your to-do list that then you can get the ball rolling. And it just feels so good to be able to look back at the end of the day and just see a bunch of things crossed off and say to yourself, man, I was super productive. And so it's just the act of like crossing something off. It's something as simple as make your bed. But then also too, like you hit a practicality thing of like, how many times are you just so exhausted and you go and jump into bed and then you're like kicking your feet and flailing all over the place because the cover's turned sideways and then you don't know which way the long end is of your blanket, and it's just a frustrated mess.
Right.
So my tip of the week in terms of starting the day off right is actually twofold. So first is lay your clothes out the night before. I know it sounds so corny. It's like, whatever, Lou, but seriously, especially if you dress up. Okay, so if you lay out your outfit in the night before, right? So you got your dress shoes, and you got your pants, and you got your socks, and you got your underwear, and you got your undershirt, and your dress shirt, and your tie, and your jacket. And if you wear the same thing every single day, that's fine. But if you're someone that likes to spice things up, you're going to want to lay out your clothes ahead of time to make sure all the colors go together, make sure everything looks crisp, everything's ironed, nothing's wrinkled, because we've all had that moment where we're running late, we put on our undershirt, we throw the dress shirt over, and the sleeve's wrinkled. And then you got to take the dress shirt off, put another dress shirt on, and then that one doesn't match. And so laying your clothes out the night before, because almost all of us are notorious for running late, especially business people. For whatever reason, we just run late because we have so much to do, I guess, or at least I run late all the time. And so being able to just jump out of the shower, brush your teeth, all that stuff, and then boom, all of your clothes are just laying right there is really good. Because it saves you time and you are fully confident that everything is going to look great. Now, the second thing is having a morning routine. So I personally, the mornings are kind of like my Zen time. I wake up in the morning, I use the bathroom, go downstairs, start making breakfast for my girlfriend and I, making lunch for my girlfriend and I, and immediately am starting the day off just like the smell of breakfast, the smell of fresh coffee, like catching up on the news from the day before, and that time really sets the pace for the rest of the day because I'm caught up on the news. I'm well rested. I'm well hydrated. I'm well fed. I have my lunch made, and it's just, again, those check marks. Just check everything off as much as you can before you leave the door, like walk out the door, and you're going to be golden. So I would say that those are my 2 start the day off right. They all kind of hopefully blended together. But I think it's really important, and I think you hit on some really good stuff there.
No, I think those are good topics. I think that's kind of the thing that we want you guys to hear during this segment. Just a couple quick tips and something to take away as a tidbit of information. So I think what we'll do now is get back into the podcast and maybe go through a really good section for you guys and give you some insight into being better at business.
Let's do it. Welcome back to the RIJB podcast. And this is our last section here of the podcast where we talk about personal interests, where we have interviews. This section is really just up for grabs depending on what we're feeling like doing on that day or who we potentially have scheduled and working on scheduling. But today we're going to talk about bettering yourself in business. So this is going to be all about tips and tricks about your first interview is the topic that we chose to cover today. Mike, I think that you're going to be well equipped with this because have you interviewed people? Have you gone through the other side of the interviewing process? I mean, I know you've been on being the interviewee.
Yeah. So the first time I did it, and we forgot to mention this, but Louie and myself were in Delta Sigma Pi, which is professional business fraternity, and we did some interviews. When we were there with pledges and did some other interviews, kind of while we were active. But I've also been able to be on the other side, kind of like you said. When I was at True Value, I was part of their recruitment team. So we did a lot of recruiting. I'd go to NIU and I'd set up a booth at the job fair. So I got to have some of that experience. And then we'd actually conduct the interviews. So it's really fun. I've gotten to be on that side from a entry-level position point of view, and since then I had several interviews when I was going for an internship. I had an interview inside of a company to get my second job as the store manager. I had to do a full-on interview because it was with a hiring manager I've never met before. And then I've done several interviews outside, some good, some bad. And obviously I've gotten to another company and I've been able to interview, well enough to trick somebody. So
what is that? What are the little nuances between like being a student and interviewing and then, so being a student interviewing, then interviewing within a company with probably people that you now know pretty well, and then being on the other side of the interview, and then once you answer that, then we can dive in and talk about kind of the tips we have for the interview process.
Yeah, I think the nice part is a lot of the interview is the same. I think every single interview you do, they're just looking for the same information. When you're going into your first internship or your first job, they're really trying to see what kind of competencies you have. You went to college. Okay, they can see that on a sheet of paper in a half second. They want to see how do you handle the resume? How do you handle your interview? How do you handle talking to people? How do you handle the information that you've done? And can you kind of put it in a shiny light for somebody to see? And when I was interviewing for my jobs, I kind of had to do that. And a lot of the tips that I have are universal for internships or jobs. And then internally, when I was listening to the interviews, it was really cool to see maybe how different people do it, or what are some of the things that are key buzzwords. Because as part of the recruitment team, we often broke up into, 2 to 3 person interview teams. And then we'd get in this big room and we'd have to talk about all these people. And it made it very easy for us when, some people hit, criteria A, B, and C. And then, everybody pretty much in that room had the same resume. So, you were able to get candidates down from 100 to maybe 50. And then from there, you had to really remember, okay, what is their interview like? What did they actually do? What did they say? How did they handle themselves? And so some of these tips that I have for you today and for our listeners, they're really good tips that you can use at any stage of your interview or however, whatever type of job you're interviewing for.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting that you say, would you agree it's almost like, easy is not the right word, but anyone can have the credentials, but it's about standing out and having someone in that room say, you know what, Mike really impressed me with this, this, and this, and he's just been on my mind ever since the interview finished, right? Like, everyone on paper is going to kind of almost squish together, and, having extracurricular activities, being involved in clubs and organizations, having leadership roles and work experience is going to help you out. But would you agree that it's having that little something that is going to make someone in that boardroom say, you know what, we need this person because he really stood out. He or she really stood out for me.
Yeah, I think when, everybody can put on paper, they can put whatever they want. But when you start getting asked questions, being on the other side of the interview, when I'm asking you a question and you answer it with something generic, it's really apparent to me that you just put it on the resume versus something I actually did, So the more the information you can give, because I can easily pick out somebody who's just kind of making their way through. And so that's a really good point, and actually kind of leads into my first point that I really wanted to talk about, is your resume. I think you need to make sure you know your resume inside and out. Don't just go to a thesaurus and look up fancy words or Google what I should put on my resume. Make sure that what you put on there is what you actually did, and make sure that you can speak in detail about it. As I've gotten up in jobs, I've handled large accounts. I've handled, multi-million-dollar categories. And if I just put the dollar amount and then I can't talk about where that money's coming from, they're going to know that it makes no sense. You can't connect the dots.
Right.
So that's a big tip for me, is make sure you know your resume. It sounds really silly, but realistically, there's a lot of people that when you ask them, you'd be like, oh, so you manage this category? And be like, oh, yeah, I guess I did. And that just doesn't bode well when you're answering that. With confidence, you're like, yes, I did. Here's why. Here's why it was such a large. Here's the margins I had, things like that. You can really expand in the job that you're looking for.
Right. Yeah, and I think, to kind of go off of that, most interviewers, and correct me if I'm wrong, but most interviewers are going to know a lot about you before you even walk into the room, because you got your Facebook page, you got your LinkedIn page, you got your Twitter, and, all these different things that people can find out information about you if they want to. And so they're going to be intrigued to ask you more. And that's why having your LinkedIn really just as professional and as up-to-date as possible before you go into a job interview is really important, because in my opinion, your resume should give kind of the surface level, the top level details about you, what you've done, where you're from, what's your story, and then your LinkedIn should be the manifesto of the rest of your resume. So like every other little nook and cranny and detail that will then bleed from your resume, and it should go right into your LinkedIn page. But would you agree that, especially maybe not like the first 100 or the first 1,000 or whatever, how many people you interview over a course of however long, but especially when you get down to like the top 10, I mean, you're probably doing research on the candidates before they even walk in the door, right?
Yeah, I think I know we have the luxury of looking at things like LinkedIn, and I know some companies do, some don't, but you even have to be mindful of other things like Facebook, and you really got to watch, what you're putting on there and who can see the content that you have, because the biggest thing you could do is just Google yourself. I know a lot of HR departments will do that and vet you. And again, those are tons of tips that we can lead into. That's going to help you, but I think that's almost a segment in of itself, like kind of how to prepare and be ready for that, for the job search. And I think that's something that we'll touch on at a different time, because like I said, I could sit here for the next half hour and just talk about things that you need to make sure you do. But I think what we want to focus on today is you got past the gatekeeper, you got past the people that have already done the research on you. Now you're sitting in front of, the hiring manager, or you're sitting on your first in-person interview. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's something that we think we can provide right now for you, as I'm sure a lot of people are doing their first interview coming up here. So, yeah,
exactly. And I would say tip number one, before you even walk in the door, know that company that you are going to be interviewing with as well as you possibly can. Publicly traded companies are going to have a lot about them. Private companies, it's going to be just a little different, but you can still do a lot of research for them. Most likely, they're going to have some sort of LinkedIn page. Go on their LinkedIn, look at all the people that work within the company, look at what they're doing, look at where they've worked before, how long have they been in this position. If you look through their LinkedIn profile and you see that they have a bunch of new employees, they have a lot of turnover, that might raise a red flag for you. But the other thing, too, is you want to look up the history behind the company. Know the CEO's name, the founder's name, what the history is, what they sell, what they do, how they make money. Know the ins and outs, and also try and figure out what you're going to be doing in that position, because then you can tailor answers to what you're going to be doing in that perceived position or that potential position. Also, know all the pop press that's going on, like what's going on in the media with this company. What are the new up and coming things that are going on? If there's any red flags, if there's anything that's like, hey, I saw this in the news. I just wanted to know a little bit more about how you're handling this, what you're doing. It just shows that you're attentive, that you do research, and that you're not going into a situation ill prepared.
Yeah, my kind of exactly what you said. Know the pop information. Know what's going on. A lot of people don't want to just hear what you read on the website and then you click to the next page and then you read their second page on the website. I know on one of my interviews, the company was going through this big change, and one of their old CEOs had done an interview, and that wasn't on their press release. That wasn't on anything. I found it from a news site, like a accredited news site, and I was able to speak to that and say that I think he had a lot of things that he was talking about that was correct, and kind of build off of that. And I think when you find those stories, or you can talk about what's directly going on, I think it can help paint a better picture that you actually care about the company. Because if you do, that's what's going on. I mean, when they see that you actually care, you do your research, they're going to know exactly how you're going to act when you have the job. So everything you touched on is extremely, extremely important. Knowing what you're about to talk about.
And that goes with any situation that you're going to be in. You want to be as prepared as possible. But so you've done your research, and you presumably do that, days and days beforehand, and now it's interview day. Some big tips I can offer on interview day is make sure that you look your best. I would dress up for the interview, meaning higher than what maybe the dress code calls for. If you know this company inside and out and you know that they're business casual, I would go in a suit. If you know it's a more casual environment, I would still dress up with some sort of sport coat, some sort of shirt and tie combination. You don't want anything too loud, but then again, some people might think that you should dress a little louder, in terms of color and fabrics and different styles, simply because if you're applying to be on a creative team and you don't dress creatively, then maybe that'll rub off the wrong way. So you just got to kind of get a feel for that. But I would say prepare your clothing the night before. Make sure everything's ironed, everything's pressed. Plan out your route the night before so you know where do you need to go, where do you need to park, do you need to pay for parking, do you have to walk somewhere, do you know what suite this building is, do you know who you're talking to, and even if it's a really, really big interview, it's the job that you have been really wanting to get, map it out beforehand. If it's really far away, maybe drive the day before, plan out that route. If it's really, really far away, get a hotel so you don't have to worry about stressing about leaving 2 hours ahead of time or whatever that case may be. You do not want to be running late because that's just going to raise your blood pressure. You're not going to be thinking correctly. You want everything to go as smoothly as possible on interview day.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And kind of everything that we touched upon are very light, very loose, but I think they're really good tips to just think about and almost go over a checklist in your mind of things that you need. The two things, I got two more tips for you that I like to just mention and are things that you should do. The first one is to make sure you connect with your references again, because you are probably going to get a call, or your references might get a call, especially as you kind of climb up in your business. I know a lot of the times when you're kind of starting out, they won't really even call your references because they know you're pretty much putting friends and family and people from school that you're working with. But I think once you get up there, they're really interested to call somebody that you worked with and kind of go from there and really see how are these people. So make sure you talk to some of your references and just let them know that you're references and really see what they think of you, to get some people that are in maybe a job that you used to have and they can vouch for how well you worked. It's really important. And I think the very last one, and I'll let kind of Louie follow it out and give up any tips that he has, is follow up. I think the best thing that I've done is send out a thank you card no less than 3 days after your interview. I think you need to make sure you get it done. Just write them a simple thank you. Point out something from the conversations you had, the interview you had, and then just thank them for their time. I think that goes a very long way, and it lets them know right off the bat that you're detail-oriented because you listen to them when you were interviewing. You actually care about the company, and you can do these tasks, something small tasks like getting a letter out within a couple days, to say thank you. So that goes farther than I think people realize, and is something that is a no-brainer to do and really takes no time at all. Get home, reflect over it, and write a thank you letter. Get it in the mail. It's a huge thing I've done. Go buy, blank thank you cards from Party City. I got a stack of them in a drawer, and every time I've gone on an interview, I just pulled one out, real quick, real small note, handwritten. Even though my handwriting looks like chicken scratch, it still goes a long way. So those are the last two topics that I had, and I don't know if you've had success with those, Louie, but.
Oh, I mean, by far the best thing is sending a handwritten thank you note. And seriously, if your handwriting is like chicken scratch or whatever, just take a little bit of time to write the card out. Really work on, when you were in grade school, following the lines and all that stuff. Just really work it out. That extra time, let me ask you this, and not, Mike, because obviously you know this, but just you, the listener. When's the last time that you received a handwritten card in the mail when it wasn't a bill? And even bills aren't handwritten. But when's the last time you received a handwritten card in the mail? That's going to it's going to stand out. And I've had interviewers say that I still have all my handwritten cards because I only have a handful of them. Or I keep them in my desk, or I'll pull them out when I'm having a down day or whatever. Those things really do matter, and that makes you stand out. And that makes that person in the boardroom say, you know what, Mike really went above and beyond. I got this card written from him. It was really, really well written. He touched on some things that we talked about in the interview. I really like, I appreciated that. It goes a long way. The other thing I would say is, okay, so you arrive early, at least 15 minutes early to the interview. You go in, firm handshake. You want to go in and just look the person in the eye that you're shaking hands with. Introduce yourself. If there's multiple people in the room, make sure that you work the room with your handshakes. Hand out your resume, preferably on nice resume paper. We, as human beings, like textiles, being able to feel the resume and in our hands and not just on regular paper. Those are some little details that you can add to your whole interview process. When you answer questions, the best thing that a lot of people, you might already know about this, but if you don't, it's called the STAR response. STAR, it's for situation, task, action, and result. If you follow this when you answer interview questions, you're going to be golden. So essentially, when you're given, hey, tell me more about the time when you did this. So you go ahead and lay out the situation, lay out the groundwork for whatever situation you were given in your previous job. Then you say the task that you had to do. Name your goals. What were the goals you had to do? Did you come up with new ideas? Did you work off of someone else's ideas? Then explain the action. So describe what you did, what you did in the project, you yourself, and name everything that you did. Even if you had a small role, you still are working in a group setting. And if it was individual, then you were spearheading the project. And then the result. So what was the finished result? And it's okay to fail. You don't have to say all the times that we're complete winners, because you're gonna the interview questions that you're probably gonna get are, tell me about yourself, why should I hire you, and tell me about a time when you failed and what did you learn from it. So knowing your failures and knowing your mistakes is okay, and that shows that you're able to grow and learn. But repeated mistakes obviously aren't okay. And then lastly, I would go ahead and, again, follow up like Mike was talking about. Send that handwritten thank you letter. And if you don't hear anything back, follow up some more. I know it's odd, but some companies like to kind of play hard to get, in the sense of who really wants this job? Who's going to follow up? If it's a sales position, they might do that to you, saying who's going to continuously call? Who's going to follow up on their customer being the job interviewer. So, and those are just some surface level things. We can go into more detail in a later episode, but I think that kind of gives a nice start to finish outline of what you can do to really stand out in that interview process and nail it on the first time, and not when you're looking for some job that you don't want down the road.
No, I agree. I think kind of all these topics, all these suggestions that we have, they've been things that have worked well for us, and are things that several sources have written about. So they're just really solid. I think there's some tips that just to think about before you do the interview, whether you've done 1,000 interviews or this is your first one ever. So it gives us a kind of good opportunity.
Awesome. Well, hey, Mike, I appreciate you collabing together on this first podcast here. I hope you had a decent time on the first go about. And we will be back in your podcast feed in 2 weeks. Until then, make sure that you find us on the blog site at Louie Zmich. Again, that's LouisZmich.com. leave us a comment on that blog post. How do you like the podcast? What can we do differently? Eventually, we're going to be setting up Twitter feeds, and I will put our Twitter handles, our personal ones, underneath the blog post. And eventually we'll be setting up dedicated ones once the podcast takes off. But this is a pilot episode, and we're just making sure that we get everything right, and we slowly grow from there once interest builds. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends. That seriously does help, because it always starts out with just friends and family, and eventually it grows, and hopefully we can be an influence in just one, person's business life. And I think that's the goal for both of us. So until next time, I'm Louie Z, my partner is Mike T, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.